Hi, I'm Tom, and this is a bit of an off the beaten track one. This is me talking about sherry. I've just done my wine of the week, which is Tio Pepe's Fino, which is delicious. And our lovely cameraman Martin and Matt from Pingsa, neither of them like sherry, and both of them think it's just for your nan. It's not. So I'm just going to do a little quick run through of why you should love sherry and what it's all about. So, sherry it's a white wine, predominantly. It's made down in Jerez, in the sort of southwest corner of Spain, between Jerez and Sanlúcar de Barrameda, those little towns, seaside fishing towns down there. And what's awesome about it is it's all the same grape variety, Palomino, or by and large, Palomino, but the aging of it and the history of it and the techniques they use is what makes it so specific and so diverse a style. First off, people think sherry is very, very sweet. Totally isn't. You get cream styles, of course, and there's a great variety called Pedro Jimenez, which has grown a little bit further northeast from Jerez, and that's a bit more sweet, and they're delicious, those wines. So you can find PX wines, they're often shorter too, or cream sherries like Harvey's Bristol Cream. They're delicious wines, they're really lovely. Have them with your dessert. But dry sherry, that's where it's all at. There's a style called Fino. Fino is what's in my glass now, which I've been sipping away at in order to get the sort of gusto for this. And just along, a little bit west from Jerez, you have a town called Sanlúcar de Barrameda, and the same wine produced over there is called Manzanilla. So you've got Fino and Manzanilla. And either of those styles are very, very dry, and these are wines that taste like citruses and wildflowers and a bit of sort of melony tropical fruits, but they've got a very distinct almond nutty character to them as well. Sherry's always got that nutty kind of characteristic. You then have another kind of style called Amontillado. Amontillado is in the middle of the richer style, which I'll talk about in a second, and the very light, elegant Finos. And this is a partially oxygen-aged wine. I'll tell you about that in a second. So it's got freshness, but it's also got a bit more nuttiness and richness than Fino. And then at the very richest, fullest end of the spectrum, you have got Oloroso. And Oloroso is a fully oxidatively aged wine, they call it. You'll understand that in just a second. And that is the fullest, broadest, deepest, darkest coloured wine that sherry can produce. How you make sherry is what's going to make you fall in love with it, and this is why you need to be drinking more of it. It's aged in what's called a Solera system. So in order to understand this, you need to think of a hugely long room filled with barrels just on their side, end to end to end to end to end. And what the producers have been doing for hundreds of years in some cases with these Solera systems, as they're called, is they've been putting wine from a vintage into the first barrel in that Solera system. They then leave it alone for a bit. They come back with the next vintage, and before they put that into a barrel, they move the wine in the first barrel into the next one. And they then put the fresh vintage wine into the first barrel that they moved that from, and so on. And over a number of years, what you end up with is huge numbers of barrels filled to the brim of wine, and at one end, the producer, to bottle the wines, takes the wine out of that barrel, or 2/3 of it, and puts that wine into the bottle, and then the salesman goes off and sells it. That's what we're drinking, delicious. And then every subsequent barrel in that lineup then has 1/3 of the wine taken from it and put into the next barrel as it goes along to top up the end barrels, until you get right back to the very beginning when that barrel is pretty much reduced to empty and you put the fresh wine into it. And that Solera system process means there's continuous blending of small amounts of wine in every single one of those barrels. So the end product could, and often does, have small amounts of really fresh new wine, but also wines that are potentially hundreds of years old as well. So that you end up with this really diverse style of wine. You're tasting history. Finally, there's two different ways you can make sherry. One is inside those barrels. If you leave a little bit of space at the top, and it's grown on the and it's aged by the sea in nice coastal cool conditions, a yeast called flor develops and sits along the top, producing a really thick layer. That flor protects the sherry underneath it and the rest of the barrel from oxygen. What oxygen does is it breaks down wines. It gives it that really nutty flavour. It makes it go darker in colour. If you leave your white wine in the fridge for a couple of weeks after you've opened it, that's the kind of characteristic it will have. At that point, it's a fault. And that flor here is protecting the sherry, and it remains very citrusy and zesty and retains a lot of the original fruit flavours. That's how you make Fino and Manzanilla. Sherry, though, has a mind of its own, and some sherries do not want that flor to grow. Either the alcohol level is a little bit too high, because that will only exist up to about 15%. If the alcohol level is higher than that in the wine, once they've added a bit of spirit to it, because it's a fortified wine, then flor won't be able to exist. And then what that does, if flor leaves, is it means there is another sort of space at the top of the barrel where oxygen can get into, and it will affect the wine. So the wines without floor covering them become very nutty and oxidative. That is Olorosos. And over the period of time that they age, they get more oxidized and more nutty and more deeply flavored. And then there's an in-between bracket, Palocortados or Amontillados. These are the wines which often begin with a bit of floor on top of them and retain their zesty characteristics. But then the floor will die away for reasons unto its own. It's a natural living thing. And once that floor leaves, it then begins to develop the wine in a more oxidative way. And so what you end up with is characteristics of both styles. So that is a hugely simplified way of talking about what is a massively complex style of wine. But I hope it just gives a little injection of an insight into why this is such a cool category. It's not just for your nan. It is one of the best value wines on the planet. They can't sell enough of the stuff, so the value and the volume, the value of wines coming out of that region has really dropped. So you can pick up bottles of this wine that are world class, some of the greatest wines in the world, for about 9–10 quid a bottle. It's unbelievable value. It's also a bit more pokey. It's about 15% up to about 20% alcohol, which means that if you come back after a day of work and you fancy a couple of glasses of wine, you only need to have one because you get a bit of a buzz just from the little one. I hope that's a bit of a beginning to this. Good luck. Try it.